Welcome to If Buildings Could Talk tour. My name is Barney and I'll be your guide through the city today. Now, it's not a political tour, it's not an architectural tour. It's a tour to tell you stories of things that happen to the buildings or at the buildings, things that if the buildings could talk, these are the stories they might tell you. Now, a little bit about Belfast. 150 years ago, Belfast was a leading player on the world stage for the processing of tobacco and the making of rope. The rope making went hand in hand with shipbuilding, with Harland Wolff being the biggest shipyard in the world. At that time, Belfast was also the biggest producer of linen in the world. And between those two industries, they employed over 100,000 people. To put that into perspective, the population of Belfast city centre today is just over 350,000. It's 350,792. It's been the same as the last 50 years. It never went up, it never went down. Anytime some young girl got pregnant, some boy left town. 50 years ago then, we had what was known as the Troubles. And during the Troubles, there was a security cordon put around Belfast city centre, and there were 7 different sections to it. Each section was given a letter from A through to G. In 1976, they took sections A, C, F and G and brought them together as one. That was the heart of Belfast city centre. The security cordon that went around that was known as the Ring of Steel. The British Secretary of State who signed off on the upgrade of that security was a guy called Merlin Rees, so the people of Belfast nicknamed it the Merlin Wall, after the Berlin Wall. But to everyone else it was known as the Ring of Steel, and the Ring of Steel was any minor road going into the city centre was completely blocked off, and every major road had 24-hour armed security. That was the Ring of Steel on this street here behind me. As you can see on the right-hand side is where traffic went in and out. The only traffic allowed in and out was public transport and delivery vehicles. This bit in the centre then is where pedestrians went through, office workers, shop workers and the likes. And then tight against the wall on the left-hand side there was a turnstile for exit only. Your bag was searched and your body was frisked. Every shop you went into there was security on the door, and again your bag was searched and your body was frisked. Similar to what you had going through an airport. That was just everyday life in Belfast. At that time, people from here would have gone to Manchester or London for the weekend, and they walked into a shop and the first thing they would do is this. It was second nature. You get searched every shop you went into. When business closed for the day, the Ring of Steel closed. So you couldn't have made a profit from a nighttime business. There was no bars, restaurants, theatres or hotels inside the Ring of Steel. It effectively killed off Belfast city centre. There was a daytime bar inside the Ring of Steel, and the family that owned the bar lived upstairs above the bar. During the Troubles, they were the only family living in Belfast city centre. During the Troubles, Belfast was rated the most dangerous city in the world. 5 years ago, a survey was done and Belfast was rated as the safest city in the UK. So with all the Troubles and all the industry, it has created a lot of characters. And it's those characters that help build the stories that I have for you today. It looks like a ship's sail. It says on the front face of it, Titanic. And there's 8 of them down the street. You have Oceanic, Normatic. Each one of them ends in IC. If a ship's name ended with IC, it was built by the White Star Line ship who built the Titanic. But from the one at the very bottom of the street to the door of the City Hall was the size of the Titanic. So Titanic filled this street. If this building could talk, it would say, don't mention the money that was found in the Police Service Leisure Centre. This was the site of the biggest ever bank robbery in the history of the UK. The 20th of December 2004, it was 5 days before Christmas, the bank was carrying an unusually large amount of cash. It was ready to go out and feed the ATMs for the Christmas holidays. The night before, armed gangs forced their way into the houses of 2 of the bank officials, Christopher Ward and Kevin McMullen. They held the families at gunpoint and told the officials to go to work the next day, follow instructions and no harm would come to their families. At lunchtime the next day, Christopher Ward got a message from the gang. He was to put £1 million into a sports bag and take it out of the bank. That was taken off the CCTV. That's Christopher leaving the bank there with £1 million. These are the 4 main banks we have in Northern Ireland: Ulster Bank, Bank of Ireland, First Trust and Northern Bank. Each bank is allowed to issue their own notes. That's important later in the story.
So don't be surprised if in Northern Ireland you find completely different looking banknotes for the same value bill.
But at the end of business, they were to take all the money out of the vault, bring it up onto the side street here and load it into the back of a van that was sitting waiting on the side street. There was 2 security guards on duty and they told the guards they'd be tidying up for Christmas and they were going to be dumping some rubbish later on. So later on, when they came past with a trolley full of boxes, the guards didn't check it. They thought it was rubbish. In fact, it was cash. There was so much money they had to do 2 runs to get it all out. So the Northern Bank decided to do, they would recall the 300 million that they had in circulation, reprint it with a different coloured ink and a different logo. 60,000 was found in 2 raids, one in Cork and one in Dublin, but nobody was ever prosecuted. Another 50,000 was found in the New Forge Country Club here in Belfast. The New Forge Country Club is a sports and leisure complex for the Police Service of Northern Ireland. They said they didn't know how it got there, it must have been left there as a distraction.
Oh, that just thanks.
The building over here with the black canopy, the Ulster Hall, the first time Led Zeppelin played Stairway to Heaven was over there.
Oh, yeah.
And the Belfast audience didn't like it. They said that goes on far too long, it'll never be a hit. So this is our next stop, the Crown Bar, and if this building could talk, it would say, "You're not calling me the Crown." This is the most famous bar in the city. Now, it's not the oldest, not by a long shot, but it's the most famous. And it's famous for its style and decor inside. The workmanship done here was done by Italian craftsmen. They're in the city at the time building churches. And you see there's dark wood carvings and stained glass windows, the wee snugs along the right-hand side. It very much has a church-like feel to it. And that's because that's the style of work they knew. Now, at that time, it was very much frowned upon for a female to be in the bar. A female certainly wouldn't have got served in the bar, but this place was very popular. You could come in with your partner, get your drink, and sit in the privacy and the comfort of the snug and enjoy the drink. And I said it was Italian craftsmen that did the work in here. They worked in the churches during the day, and then in the evening time they did work in here. And part of their payment was free food and accommodation. The tiled mosaic on the outside here, nobody's sure how much of that is original, because it sits across the road from the Europa Hotel, and the Europa was bombed over 30 times during the Troubles. Every time it was bombed, there was a bit of damage repair had to be done here. There was one bomb in particular that blew the windows out. Now, when I say the windows, I don't just mean the glass, but the whole frame. Everything was blown out. When the restoration team came to do the repair work, there was no detailed design of what the windows looked like. And then one of the team remembered a movie that had been shot in 1947 starring James Mason called Odd Man Out, and the Crown Bar had featured in the movie. So they got in touch with the production company and they went through their archives and they found the set design for the Crown Bar and they sent it over to Belfast. And from that they recreated the windows exactly as they were. The bar started life, it was called the Railway Tavern. 135 years ago it was bought over by Michael Flanagan and Michael gave it to his son Patrick. Patrick and his wife took on the challenge of renovating the bar and renaming it. Patrick's wife was a big fan of the royal family and she declared it would be called the Crown in honour of the royal family. And Patrick, who wasn't a fan of the royal, says, "Oh no, you'll not be doing that." No, she said, "I will. You can decorate the place whatever way you want, but it will be called the Crown." And as you can see, it is called the Crown. And in Patrick's devilment then, he tiled the Crown into the front doorstep so that anybody walking into the bar would be walking all over the Crown. Democracy at its best. They both got what they wanted. So I'm going to introduce you now from the most famous bar in the city to the most famous hotel in the city, the Europa Hotel. And you would think to yourself, who would spend 2 million in a hotel in the most dangerous city in the world? Well, in the early 1960s, we didn't have the Troubles. And Belfast was a thriving, busier city than Dublin. So it wasn't such a bad idea. But when they eventually opened the doors in 1971, their timing couldn't have been worse. The British soldiers had just come onto the streets of Belfast, the Troubles were getting to their peak, and the first bomb on the hotel was a few weeks before the hotel even opened. It was then bombed 20 times in its first 3 years of business. Every time it was bombed, security forces would come in, they would do a search around and declare it was safe to go back into work. And within an hour, the glaziers were there replacing all the glass. One of the kitchen staff asked the glaziers one time, he says, "How come you guys can get here so quickly?" And he says, "We have a spare set of glass in the store at all time, ready for the next bomb at the Europa." Now, when the Metropolitan Group opened the hotel, their timing couldn't have been worse. When the Hastings Group took over the hotel, their timing couldn't have been better. Shortly after they took over was the start of the peace process. Then when President Clinton came to Belfast, he insisted on showing his faith in the peace process. He would stay in the most bombed hotel in the world, which it was at that time. And 3 years later, we had the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. So where every other hotel group had bombs and devastation, the Hastings Group had none of it. They just got very lucky. William Hastings has been interviewed one time and they mentioned that he didn't have the problems everybody else had. And he said, "I was just a lucky duck." And that's an expression we would have here whenever things are going your way. You say, "God, you're a lucky duck." And to this day, if you book into any of the Hastings hotels, in your room there'll be a wee plastic duck. And if you think it's going to bring you luck, you can take it with you. On the run-up to the Good Friday Agreement, all the polls had the no campaign slightly ahead. Individual people would declare what way they were going to vote, but no business would say what they were doing. They were afraid of losing 50% of their customers. And William Hastings decided for the good of business and the good of tourism, it's time to stop saying no and start saying yes. And he draped a banner over the hotel And if you count 3 windows up and 2 panels wide, and from there to the top, that was the size of the banner. All it said was yes. The campaigners believed that swayed the yes campaign to winning with 71% of the vote. That photograph was circulated around the world and it was worth over $1 million in free advertising for the hotel. So if this building could talk, it would say, "I hope you're enjoying peace in Northern Ireland today."